The moment my new daughter-in-law whispered those words, everything I thought I knew about the day, about my wife, about my life, snapped like a rotted beam under too much weight. We were sitting at the head table. The champagne had just been poured. The DJ was easing the volume down as guests raised glasses and stood to toast the newlyweds. My son was glowing, handsome in his tailored navy suit, hand in hand with his bride, who moments before had laughed so sweetly it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Then she leaned toward me. Her fingers brushed my forearm, not harshly, but with the deliberate grip of someone who'd rehearsed this. Her voice barely audible over the hum of polite laughter. "Dad, look under the table. Don't make a scene." It wasn't the words that stopped my breath. It was how she said them. Calm, composed, calculated, like someone who'd already played out 100 versions of what could come next. My first instinct was to smile, maybe joke, but something in her expression made me hesitate. She didn't blink. Her gaze was locked dead ahead, toward the other end of the banquet hall. So I slid my hand under the tablecloth, half expecting, what? A prank? A gift? Instead, my fingers brushed paper, taped to the underside. I peeled it free and pulled it quietly into my lap. It was a photo. I didn't understand at first. It was grainy, faded, Polaroid, the kind that should have stayed in a shoebox, lost to time. Then it hit me. My wife, younger, but unmistakably her, tangled in white sheets. Not ours. Her eyes closed, mouth half open in mid-laugh. She wasn't alone. A man lay beside her, propped on one elbow, shirtless. I knew that face. My skin flushed ice cold. My ears started ringing, the way they did when my blood pressure spiked. I wanted to throw the photo, burn it, but I couldn't look away. The man in the picture was sitting 20 feet from me, laughing with the mother of the bride. He hadn't aged well. None of us had. But I remembered that smirk, that slick back hair. I remembered how she'd brushed off my suspicions years ago when I'd found an old photo of them from college. "You're just paranoid. It's all your work. He was just a friend. God, you're so insecure." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I'd buried it, moved on, raised our son, built a life, became what she wanted, stable, predictable, safe. But now I sat at my own son's wedding, holding evidence that I'd been played for decades. Across the room, my wife beamed at the crowd, laughing at something the groom's uncle had said. Her hand rested casually on her wine glass. Her other hand, I noticed, had a faint tremble, just a flick. You'd miss it if you didn't know what to look for. I looked at my daughter-in-law. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were still forward, her smile unwavering. "She said it didn't matter anymore," she murmured. "But I thought you should decide that." There was no drama in her tone, just quiet strength. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to show me. If you've made it this far, let me ask you for something small. Most people who hear this won't ever hit subscribe. But if you're one of the few who does, it tells the team working on these stories that this matters, and that you want more. I folded the photo in half and slipped it into my jacket pocket. My hands felt strange, foreign, like they weren't mine. I rose from the table with measured calm, kissed my son's cheek, told him I needed some air. Outside, the garden was dimly lit with fairy lights. A string quartet played somewhere in the distance, the melody sharp and raw. I leaned against a tree. My heart was galloping, but my mind was oddly clear. I pulled out my phone, searched for a number I hadn't dialed in years. I still had it saved under Greg, college. My thumb hovered, then tapped. It rang. Once. Twice. No answer. Then, "Hey, it's Greg. Leave a message. Or don't. I'm probably on the golf course." Same voice. Same smugness. I ended the call, then opened a different contact, my attorney. No greeting. Just, pull up the file from 2002. The archived emails. There was a pause. "You sure?" "Very." I hung up. Some people think betrayal feels like a stab, a sharp pain. They're wrong. It feels like your bones are being slowly hollowed out by someone who smiled while doing it. I stood in the garden, surrounded by laughter muffled by stone walls and French doors, but it felt like I was in another time zone. That photo, it didn't just show betrayal, it timestamped it. It fossilized a moment she had buried so deep under the years of PDA meetings, holiday cards, and fake anniversary smiles that even I had stopped digging. But it was still there, like a landmine. And tonight, my daughter-in-law stepped right on it and handed me the wire. I slipped the photo into my jacket pocket, pressing it against my chest like a loaded pistol. My fingers hovered over my phone. I hadn't dialed this number in. God, how long had it been? Greg. She used to call him, just a harmless flirt. He was at our wedding, sat in the back, wore a silver tie. I remembered because she insisted he be invited, even though I'd never met the guy. Said they were in a philosophy class together. He'd made her laugh, in a completely innocent way. Back then, I convinced myself it was harmless. A name, a story, college nostalgia. But now the photo burned in my pocket. Same smirk, same room, tone lighting, different timeline. One she never shared with me. I tapped his name in my contacts. It rang. My lungs forgot how to breathe. Voicemail. Hey, it's Greg. You know what to do. I hung up. The voice hadn't changed much, still that smug, sing-song rhythm. Like a man who thought he'd never be caught. Or worse, who believed he had been caught and nothing came of it. So what was the risk? That kind of man is dangerous. Arrogant. Careless. The kind who sleeps with his friend's wife and sleeps just fine after. I sat on a stone bench and stared out over the trimmed hedges, the kind my wife used to obsess over in Better Homes magazines. If you want to impress guests, she'd said once, the garden has to feel expensive without screaming it. Well, guess what? The garden was perfect. And now it was where I sat, planning the quiet end of her little kingdom. I opened another contact. My lawyer, Ken. Now I hadn't called in a while. Not since we redrafted our wills after my dad passed. But we kept things friendly, golf, Christmas cards, a beer once a year. I knew he kept files, even after cases closed. Paranoid, like me. Pull up the file from 2002, I said when he answered. Who is this? Don't be cute. Pause. John. Yep. Another pause. Why the hell do you want the 2002 archive? That's your wife's old emails. Yes. Every forwarded message. Every chat log. You said you backed them. He hesitated. I might still have the server dump. What? I found a photo. A long silence. The kind that makes the word annulment feel late to the party. He exhaled. Give me 20 minutes. No. I'm at a wedding. Give me 10. I ended the call. My hands were steady now. My blood had chilled from confusion to calculation. This wasn't just about a fling anymore. It was about a pattern. A decade of gaslighting. A woman who told me I worked too much, was too cold, that I didn't get her the way others did. And by others, apparently, she meant Greg. And if I had to guess, he wasn't the only one. Men like him don't show up at weddings unless they've been given a reason. All right. I replayed the voicemail in my head. That smug tone. My jaw locked. Then I remembered something else. In 2003, my wife had gotten sick. Appendicitis. I stayed at the hospital 3 nights straight. She said she barely remembered anything. But there was a stretch, about 2 weeks before that, when she'd taken a solo trip to a cabin with some college girlfriends. She came back different. Warmer. Then distant. Then cold. I let it go, because I thought maybe it was my fault. Maybe I had changed. Maybe I wasn't enough. But standing in that garden now, I realized, no, I hadn't changed. I had been rewired by her excuses, softened by her stories. I'd made myself smaller, so her lies wouldn't echo so loudly in the house we built. Well, I was done shrinking. And when I went back inside, the mask would stay on, for now. The good husband, the proud father. But underneath, a man ready to burn the script. Because the past wasn't done with us. And this time, I was the one digging. The clink of silver on glass was sharp enough to slice through the noise. Guests quieted. Heads turned. And there she was, my wife, bathed in the glow of chandeliers and borrowed grace, lifting a microphone with a theatrical smile like she'd been rehearsing for Broadway. To my son, she began, her voice trembling in just the right, maternal, performative way. The pride of my life. The little boy who used to sneak cookies before dinner and somehow turned into this incredible man. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Cameras came out. A few drunk uncles wiped at imaginary tears. She smiled wider. And to my husband, my rock, the man who always believed in us, who made this day possible with his quiet strength. Quiet strength. She said it like a compliment, like a pet name for the man who never made noise, never asked questions, never knew better. I didn't smile. I just watched. She raised her glass toward me like a queen nodding at her loyal knight. Guests followed suit, cheers and ahs echoing. Champagne sparkled in the air. And across from me, his hand already raised in a slow toast, sat the best man's uncle. Greg, the man from the photo. The man whose voice had just danced out of my voicemail an hour earlier. He looked back at me with that same half-smirk from the Polaroid. He didn't flinch. Not a single blink. Just lifted his glass, nodded, and sipped. Beside me, my daughter-in-law leaned in again, softer this time. I found the photo while helping her pack the day before the rehearsal dinner, she murmured. Taped under a drawer in one of her old keepsake boxes. She said it was just a fling. With the best man's uncle. Just a fling. Like misplacing a sock. Like bumping a stranger's arm in the supermarket. I stared ahead, but my grip tightened around the champagne flute. I could feel the stem creaking between my fingers. A toast to her husband, the man she swore loyalty to, while the man she cheated with toasted us from across the room like a proud relative at a barbecue. And no one noticed. No one but me, my new daughter-in-law, and the woman smiling into the mic like she'd never buried the truth beneath a wedding gift. The layers of irony were surgical, calculated. She wasn't celebrating. She was securing her image. Because that's what she always did. From the outside, our marriage looked like an insurance ad. Well-dressed, well-aged, two smiling people watching the world from a perfect porch. But the truth? I was the porch. The stable thing she stood on while pretending the house hadn't burned behind her. I scanned the room. The best man, our nephew, was mid-conversation with a cousin. Oblivious. The uncle, Greg, sat calm, legs crossed, like a man who believed he had nothing left to lose. He probably thought he'd won. That he'd buried this years ago. That I'd stay in my role. Quiet, passive, domesticated. But tonight, he'd miscalculated. Because the thing about being invisible for 20 years, you see everything. I leaned toward my daughter-in-law, voice low. How long have you known? A few days, she said. I almost didn't say anything. But you deserve to know. Before you stood there smiling while she dragged you into another lie. I nodded once. Not in thanks. Not in anger. Just acknowledgement. I'll handle it, I said. Her eyes searched mine. You're not going to. No scene, I said. Not yet. Because this wasn't going to end with a broken glass and shouting. That would be too easy for her. Too clean. I wanted it to spread. To linger. To unspool thread by thread until the entire dress unraveled. She sat down as the applause for her toast finally died out. She glanced at me, probably expecting gratitude, a squeeze of the hand, a performative smile for the camera. I gave her nothing. Not anger. Not confusion. Just stillness. Because nothing unsettles a liar more than silence. The mic passed to the best man, who cracked a joke about the groom's haircut, and the room erupted again in laughter and nostalgia. But beneath the laughter, I could feel it, like a wire tightening, and the countdown had already begun. He stood near the dessert table, licking something off his thumb like he owned the damn place. White shirt, rolled sleeves, that overconfident stance of a man who still thinks he's welcome because no one's told him otherwise yet. People floated around him, glasses in hand, swapping stories and fake congratulations, but none of it touched him. Greg was in his element, comfortable, smug, invisible in plain sight. I walked over slowly, careful not to draw attention. My jacket was buttoned, the photo still in my inner pocket, pressing like a heartbeat I could no longer ignore. Excuse me, I said, smiling faintly. We ever met before? He turned, took a beat to scan my face, probably trying to place me in the proper column. Friend? Threat? Forgotten? You look familiar, he said, defaulting to that oily half-smirk. College, maybe? I tilted my head like I was trying to remember something. Could be. You go to Easton? Class of 91, he said. Philosophy major, mostly skipped class. You know how it is. Oh, I knew. He always bragged about that back then. You can't teach genius, he once wrote in the college yearbook under his name. Only tolerate it. My wife used to laugh at that line. Said it was so Greg. Yeah, I said. I remember that. And you were friends with. I trailed off, letting him fill in the blank. He didn't. He just smiled, lifting a small chocolate tart from a silver tray and taking a bite like we were just two old guys catching up over dessert. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for someone to bail him out. Maybe my wife. Maybe a waiter. Maybe a clean exit. You know, I said, stepping in just slightly closer. I think I remember the shirt you were wearing. In that photo. The smirk died. It didn't vanish completely. He was too practiced for that. But it shifted. Just a half-inch falter in the corners. A muscle twitch in the cheek. The kind of change only noticeable when you're waiting for it. He didn't answer right away. Just chewed slowly. Swallowed. Set the empty tart wrapper down like he needed both hands free for what might come next. Then, finally, you'll have to be more specific. Of course. Still playing coy. Still betting on me not having the nerve to say it out loud. Not here. Not at my own son's wedding. I leaned in. Close enough for only him to hear. Red. Long sleeves. Faded collar. Wrinkled, like it had been stuffed under a bed for a week. He blinked. And your watch? I continued, calm as a surgeon. The one with the leather strap. You left it on the nightstand, right next to my wife's hair tie. There it was. The smirk cracked. Not fully. Not enough for the watching world to notice. But to me, It was seismic. He opened his mouth, probably to deny, maybe to deflect, but I held up a hand. Don't bother. I'm not here to yell. I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to see your face when you realized I knew. That shut him up. For now, I could see him mentally flipping through options. Deny, gaslight, laugh it off, threaten, maybe even apologize, but none of them would land. Not with me. Not tonight. He cleared his throat. Look, that was old, I said. Yeah, feels that way. Doesn't make it less true, though. He took a step back. Not obvious. Just enough to create space. I let him. Enjoy the cake, I said. And I walked away. No fireworks. No scene. Just a fuse, now lit. A fuse only he, my daughter-in-law, and I could hear sizzling. Because what I wanted wasn't chaos. I wanted precision. And that part was just beginning. I didn't rush. That would have drawn too much attention. Besides, the best revenge is never loud at the start. It's silent, dressed in a smile, and timed to precision. The DJ's booth was tucked into the far corner of the ballroom, behind a velvet robe and a half-curtained table. He was a young guy, mid-20s, the type who thinks every room is his stage, bobbing his head to the beat of his own playlist even when no one's dancing. He looked up, startled, when I approached. Sir, you need something? I pulled the envelope from my jacket. A plain white rectangle, nothing flashy. No threats written on the front. Just wait. Play this, I said, voice even. In 5 minutes. He raised a brow. Oh, what is it? Slideshow. Family photos. Set it to Fields of Gold, or something equally sentimental. It'll autoplay. He hesitated. I've got the couple's set list. They'll love it, I said flatly. There was something in my tone. Not aggressive. Not begging. Just final. He took the envelope without another word. Inside was a USB drive. On it, 38 images. Vacations, birthdays, baby's first steps, my wife cradling our son, me pushing him on a swing, her laughing in the snow. All sweet. All innocent. All bait. The last slide? The photo from under the table. Enlarged. Cleaned up. Every detail visible. The tangled sheets, her half-closed eyes, his grin. But with one added flourish. A bold white watermark across the bottom corner. June 14th, 2008. Our 10th wedding anniversary. While I was at home setting up candles and grilling ribeye in our backyard, she was somewhere else, wearing nothing but lies and perfume. That date mattered. Not because it was the worst day of my life. Because it was the one she made me celebrate every year after. The one she pretended was sacred. The one she toasted to in front of our son, our friends, our families, with that same lying smile she wore today. I stepped back from the booth and re-entered the ballroom. The music had shifted. Something jazzy mid-tempo. Guests were milling about. Laughter bubbled like champagne. Cheap, surface deep. My wife stood by the cake table now, talking to the photographer. Her hand rested gently on the table, the same one she'd rested on my shoulder during our wedding dance 2 decades ago. And there was Greg, still working the room like a politician. He thought the storm had passed, that my quiet confrontation meant surrender, that I'd let it die, like every other man she'd fooled. I made my way back to our table. My daughter-in-law caught my eyes. One look was enough. She knew. 5 minutes. Tick. I took a sip of champagne. Talk. The projector screen was already lowered, framed with white lilies and gold trim. It was originally meant to show a slideshow the couple had put together. But that was later. This was mine. I caught my wife's eye across the room. She gave me a puzzled look, cocked her head, started to walk over. But the lights dimmed. Right on cue. And all I did was sit back. Because sometimes vengeance doesn't need a voice. It just needs a trigger. And I'd placed mine right at the heart of every centerpiece in this room. It began like every other wedding slideshow. Soft piano, slow dissolves, heartstring tugs. First, a picture of my son in a bathtub with shampoo horns, grinning at the camera with 2 missing teeth. The crowd chuckled. Then a family picnic in 2001, my wife feeding him strawberries while I manned the grill in the background. A chorus of "Ost" spread. People leaned in. Laughter built in comfortable waves. A photo of his high school graduation. One of our last family trips to Lake Ontario, all 3 of us smiling in front of the cabin. The soundtrack swelled, some syrupy instrumental piece that made old women dab at their eyes. I watched her. She stood near the middle of the room now, surrounded by mutuals. One hand on her wine glass. That performative smile stitched neatly across her face, the kind she wore when hosting charity brunches, warm but hollow. She was nodding along with guests, giving that modest shake of the head every time someone whispered, "Beautiful family." Greg stood 3 feet behind her, arms crossed, smirking at the photos like a proud uncle. And then, the screen went dark. 1 second. 2. A pause long enough for heads to tilt and a few murmurs to rise. And then it flashed. No transition. No fade. Just the image. Her. Greg. The bed. The expression. The watermark in white, clean font. June 14th, 2008. Happy 10th, darling. It landed like a hammer. Gasps. Audible. Uncontrolled. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered. A woman choked on her drink. A chair scraped violently across the floor. The music didn't stop right away. It tried to keep playing, like a desperate string quartet on a sinking ship. But then the DJ caught up, and the melody snapped mid-note, cut dead. Silence. Every face in the room turned to her. Even Greg's smirk melted into something closer to panic. She didn't move. Her wine glass remained in midair, trembling slightly in her hand. Her face drained of color so fast, it was like watching a slow-motion cardiac arrest. And my son, God help him, stood frozen between two worlds. One where his parents were exactly who they claimed to be, and the other, now unfolding in front of 150 wedding guests, where his mother had just been exposed as a liar, a cheater, and a woman who brought poison to the dinner table for decades. His lips parted, but no sound came out. And beside me, my daughter-in-law reached out and touched his sleeve, gently, grounding him. The murmur built. From one table to the next. Is that? Wait, is that her? Oh my God, she looks so young in that. Is that the uncle? I thought they were just friends from college. The whispers became waves. No one moved to shut off the projector. No one dared. The photo just hung there, frozen in time, lit by crystal chandeliers and the flickering candlelight of the centerpiece arrangements. It stayed up for 30 seconds, maybe less. But in that stretch, my wife aged 10 years. Her back, once straight and poised, began to curl in on itself. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes scanned the room for a single ally and found none. She turned to me, and for the first time in our marriage, she looked afraid. Truly, viscerally afraid. Not of punishment, but of consequence. I didn't look away. I didn't speak. I let the image burn. And in that silence, she finally understood something I had tried to give her for years, the truth. And the truth isn't loud. It's just undeniable. She stormed through the ballroom like a gust of heat, the sound of her heels stabbing into the floor louder than the stunned silence that had swallowed the room. People parted for her like smoke for fire. No one dared speak. Even the clinking of silverware had died. Her eyes were wild, red, frantic, darting between guests and faces, desperately searching for a glitch in reality. A way to undo the slide. Rewind the moment. Find a villain other than herself. She locked onto me. What did you do? She hissed, standing just inches from me at the head table. I stayed seated, calm, palms flat on the tablecloth. I could feel everyone watching, my cousins, her college friends, the officiant, even the damn florist by the doorway. It didn't matter. This wasn't their scene. It was mine. I turned away from her, slowly, intentionally, and looked at our son. He stood stiff as stone, face pale, mouth open just enough to let a breath tremble through. His champagne glass tilted slightly in his hand, forgotten. I didn't want to do this today, I said, voice low but clear. But your mother left me no choice. He blinked. One slow blink that said everything. Behind him, the bride kept a firm hold on his arm. She hadn't said a word since the photo dropped, but now, she turned to him. Her voice not shaken, not dramatic, just steady. You deserve better, she said gently. We both do. He looked at her, then at me, then back at his mother. My wife's mouth twisted, like she was about to cry or scream. This is your son's wedding, she spat. How dare you? My son, I repeated, cutting her off, deserved a mother who didn't lie to his face every Christmas, every birthday, every time she toasted a happy marriage. Her breath caught. That photo was years ago. It was our 10th anniversary, I said, not raising my voice. I was home, lighting candles. You were elsewhere. Gasps again, sharper now. People hadn't moved, but they were definitely listening, leaning in. Some were whispering behind menus. Others just watched, wide-eyed, caught between horror and disbelief. You blindsided me, she whispered. You humiliated me. No, I replied. You did that. I just held up the mirror. For the first time in years, I watched her face unravel. Not the public mask, not the smug deflections, but the actual woman underneath. And beneath all that makeup and practiced poise, she looked small. Not broken. Not yet. But the cracks were there. She reached out to our son, desperate now. You know I love you. I've always. He stepped back. Not a word. Just one slow, shattering step. The motion crushed something in her. You could see it. Like watching glass fracture under pressure. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her hands hovered midair, useless. And I realized something in that moment. She hadn't prepared for this. Not really. She'd always assumed I wouldn't act. That I'd be too passive, too image-conscious, too decent. And maybe I had been. But decency ends where deception thrives. I stood up, taller than I'd felt in years. Go home, I said flatly. Tonight isn't yours anymore. The words were like ice water. Sharp, clean, final. She staggered back a step, looked around for someone, anyone, to contradict me, to pull her back into the spotlight. No one moved. Because in that moment, everyone finally saw what I had been living with for 2 decades. And no one wanted to be near the wreckage. I had barely stepped down from the head table when she appeared at my side. A small woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and a brooch that looked older than our marriage. Aunt Margot, my wife's great-aunt, technically, though we all just called her Aunt. She rarely spoke unless prompted, always watching from corners with a kind of patient judgment only people born before color television seemed to carry. She tapped my elbow gently and said, just above a whisper, "She swore me to silence years ago. Said it was a phase. That you two were working things out." I turned to her slowly. You knew? Her eyes, sharp behind her glasses, didn't flinch. I knew something. That man, Greg, he came to Christmas brunch in '09. Sat at your table. You were out back grilling ham steaks. She told everyone he was a friend from her book club. I stared. I always thought you didn't deserve it, she added quietly. But I assumed you must have known. Or maybe didn't want to. No bitterness in her voice. Just quiet, brutal clarity. And somehow that stung more than the slideshow. Because she was right. I had seen things. I just called them coincidences. I'd believed the best in her because that's what good husbands do. Or at least, what we're taught they should do. Trust. Forgive. Ignore that occasional chill in the room. Now, the truth was coming out of the woodwork. I turned. 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were huddled by the bar, whispering. One of them, Claire, caught my eye and looked away fast, guilty. She tugged on her husband's sleeve. They left their drinks untouched. Another guest, someone from our old church group, nudged a friend and muttered, "Isn't that the guy from the 2010 fundraiser?" I thought he was her cousin or something. I walked through the ballroom slowly, each step revealing a new pair of lowered voices, a new shift in posture. A new glance darted toward my wife, like she was some rotted centerpiece no one wanted to admit was still on the table. It was spreading. Her affair wasn't just mine to carry anymore. Turns out, it never was. Greg had been at more events than I remembered. He'd stopped by family barbecues, showed up early for a 4th of July party, brought store-bought potato salad, laughed too loud at my son's jokes like he knew him better than he should have. I always assumed he was being polite, social, helpful. But helpful men don't linger in kitchens with married women when the rest of the party's outside. And now those fragments came rushing back with sickening clarity. The time she changed her shirt after greeting him at the door. The way she would accidentally run into him at the bookstore and then bring home a new philosophy novel she claimed our son would love. The time she got drunk at our anniversary dinner and called me Greg under her breath. Swore she meant Graham, the waiter. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I was complicit. Not in her lies, but in the silence that gave them shelter. But now the silence was broken. Margot squeezed my arm. You were always the good one. She never deserved you. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. Not yet. But as I looked around the room, I saw the slow tectonic shift taking place. People were no longer looking at me like the villain for ruining the evening. They were looking at her. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't smile her way out of it. She stood near the exit now, still as glass, watching whispers move like wildfire. She knew it too. The damage wasn't just from the photo. It was from the recognition. This wasn't new. This wasn't private. This had simply gone undiscussed. Until now. She tried to disappear into the wallpaper. After the whispers started multiplying like spores, after the photo had already done its work, after the smirk had long since died on Greg's face and the toasts had turned to tension, she lingered. Still in her designer heels, her carefully curated jewelry, the pale peach gown that had taken 3 fittings to perfect. But now she stood alone, a statue everyone tried not to photograph. She thought staying quiet would buy her time. That maybe the news cycle of this wedding would move on. That people would dance again. That the room would forget. It didn't. It froze her in place. A slow, suffocating orbit of glances and muttered reappraisals. I gave her 10 minutes. On purpose. I wanted the silence to set. The judgment to marinate. the shame to crawl beneath her skin like damp ivy, slow and inescapable. Then I walked over to the event coordinator and said it plainly. We need security. She blinked. Sir. I leaned in. Don't make a scene. I'm asking as the father of the groom. Escort my wife out. Quietly. No yelling. No hands. Just presence. Dignified, if possible. Firm, if necessary. She hesitated. I'm not joking, I said. She's no longer welcome. Minutes later, I watched two black-suited security professionals make their way toward her. Not fast, just deliberate, like clock hands ticking toward midnight. She saw them approaching and straightened, adjusted her bracelet, lifted her chin the way she did when deflecting guilt at dinner parties. And when they finally reached her, one spoke gently, too quiet to hear over the music, but the gesture was unmistakable, an open palm toward the exit. She blinked once, then twice, then looked around as if someone, anyone, might come to her defense. Excuse me, she snapped, her voice rising just enough to turn heads. You must be mistaken. This is my son's wedding. She looked toward our son, desperate. He didn't move. Then she looked at me. I didn't blink. And that's when the bride stepped forward. The whole room shifted with her. She was radiant in a way my wife never could be. Not because of her dress or her hair or her youth. Because of her stillness. Her certainty. She stood between my wife and the aisle and said, with more grace than I could have ever mustered, "No, it's mine now." The sentence cracked like thunder through velvet. My wife froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The guards didn't touch her. They didn't need to. She took one step, then another, each movement slower than the last, like her body was dragging grief behind it. Her heels clicked across the marble, sharp, final, echoing like a metronome for her own fall from grace. Click, click, click. No shouting, no fighting, just a hush that followed her through the corridor. Guests watched, some with pity, some with concealed satisfaction, some with relief that it wasn't their secret on display. And just like that, she was gone. Not dragged, not shoved, removed. For years, I had been the quiet one, the background husband, the man who let things slide for the sake of peace. Now, I was the one who stayed, and she was the one who had to go. The ballroom didn't recover immediately. The music came back, hesitant at first, like even the speakers weren't sure if they should be playing. A slow jazz standard trickled in, half-hearted. A few guests shuffled onto the dance floor, pretending nothing had happened, movements stiff, forced. A cousin laughed too loudly at something no one else heard. Someone refilled their glass just for something to hold. But one table remained untouched. The one with the gold-trimmed place cards, the personalized mother of the groom, napkin, the half-drunk flute of champagne, lipstick stained and left behind like an artifact. Her table, empty. The chair was still angled from when she stood. Her purse gone. Her scent, the expensive one she wore only on holidays, lingered faintly, but even that was thinning out under the pressure of embarrassment and too many roses on the centerpiece. No one sat there. No one would. I stepped out through the side door, past the row of potted ferns and into the quiet of the garden again. Same string lights, same gravel crunch underfoot, but everything felt different now. Lighter, like I'd just exhaled for the first time in a decade. I heard footsteps behind me and didn't need to turn. My son stood next to me, hands in his pockets, tie loosened, jaw tight. You knew? I asked without looking at him. Not fully, he said. Just things. Bits. I waited. I heard her one night, he added, when I was a teenager, talking on the phone. I think it was him. I didn't understand what it meant back then. Then I saw a message on her laptop once, when she left it open. He looked down at the ground, as if searching for a better version of the memory in the dirt. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was nothing. But when Emma found that photo while packing, I knew. I nodded. Why didn't you come to me? Because I wasn't sure you'd want to see it. That hit harder than I expected. But he was right. There's a strange comfort in denial. You build routines around it. You decorate it. You let it settle into your furniture and your anniversary dinners. You make it normal, until someone holds up the truth and asks, "Is this the life you meant to live?" "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. I turned to him, really looked at him. This man who had just stepped into a marriage of his own, still young enough to believe in forever, but now old enough to see that not everyone who promises it means it. "I'm not," I said. He frowned. "I'm finally free," I said again. Not bitter, not triumphant, just clean. The breeze picked up, rustling the hedges. Somewhere inside, the DJ switched tracks again, something upbeat, trying to pull the room back from the brink. Laughter reemerged in cautious ripples. The kind of sound people make when they think it's safe to resume the play. I watched the glow from the windows, the silhouettes of dancers moving stiffly under golden chandeliers. None of them would forget tonight. Not because of the food, or the first dance, or the cake, but because of the one image that shattered a legacy in 30 seconds. Inside, the projector was dark again, the slideshow long over. The screen rolled back, but the photo still existed in every guest's mind. Etched, permanent. The woman who thought she could control the narrative had written her final chapter in front of a full house, and I hadn't needed to raise my voice once. Her name wouldn't be whispered in reverence anymore, just in warning. And as I stood beside my son, both of us facing forward into the night, I didn't feel loss. I felt weightlessness, not because she was gone, but because the lie was.